Welcome to Bird Friendly Backyards, presented by Ann Swain, who is the Executive Director of the Sawmill River Audubon. This program is sponsored by the Bedford Free, Lewisboro, Pound Ridge, and Ruth Keeler Memorial Libraries. I'm Liz Gabriel, representing the Lewisboro Library. And just to give a little plug, you can visit our library websites to learn about additional upcoming programs. The Sawmill River Audubon is a local chapter of the National Audubon, and it is based in Chappaqua. Anne began working there in 1989 and has served as executive director since 2004. For those who saw her program last year on Birding 101, you know you are in for a great program tonight, as she takes us through the best way to attract and benefit birds. For tonight's program, she has put together a sheet of additional resources which is available to download from the library website. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that introduction, and hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be with you here tonight. A big thanks to the 4 libraries co-sponsoring tonight's program. And let me just lose this other box here. There we go. All right. So I'm Ann Swain. And I put together a lot of different ideas for you tonight about bird-friendly backyards. Yes, talking about bird houses and bird feeders, but also much more. And I want to first of all give a mention of credits, both for my still photos and video and sound clips tonight. And you'll see those credits on the screen. And I also want to give a shout out to the fact that I'm part of a much larger community of bird clubs and Audubon chapters all over New York State, all over the United States. These are just some of the groups just from Albany down to New York City. And in particular, I want to show you just a quick map of some of the Audubon groups right around our area. This is also a map that explains why Westchester is so birdy, because we're in between the Hudson River and Long Island Sound Atlantic Coast, which are both big flyways. But especially I want to give a shout out to Bedford Audubon, the chapter that serves the communities of the sponsoring libraries. All of the Audubon groups offer you free programs and field trips and information about bird habitats. So what's it mean to be a good bird neighbor? Have a bird-friendly backyard. I want to give some big ideas and narrow in on some specifics. This is just an hour program, so I can't cover everything, but I most importantly want to point you to a lot of good resources for you to go deeper as you want. And the key overriding idea here is to look at your backyard or any property you can influence, whether school, work, community. Look at it the way a wildlife biologist would look at it in terms of the habitat needs, right? So the main habitats needs for plants, as well as all kinds of wildlife, birds, mammals, all kinds of wildlife, are shelter, water, space, and food, and some kind of arrangement that makes a habitat, right? So a lot of times people think about shelter, for example, adding a box. Well, only some birds will nest in boxes. We'll talk a lot about boxes, and that's certainly a wonderful thing if you have the right arrangement, the right amount of space that would attract bluebirds. They won't come to every yard. They'll come to some, but not others. And when people think of food and birds, right away they think of bird feeders. And bird feeders are great fun for people. They're largely for people to see birds up close. And we're going to talk about feeders tonight, and we really enjoy bird feeders. And there's no question that if you have a, say like a February day, right, where it seems to get dark so early and there's an ice storm going on, there's no question that a bird feeder can be the edge of survival for a lot of birds, particularly, you're taking a look at these beautiful cardinals here, and the red-bellied woodpecker here, and even the starling up here. This feeder may be an edge of survival for them. But largely, for the most part, Cornell Lab of Ornithology has shown that birds only rely on a feeder for maybe about 30% of their food. So it's not their sole source. Some people are afraid, like if they stop feeding, the birds will starve. No, they're still going to forage elsewhere or shift to other feeders in the neighborhood too, right? But bird boxes, they're part of a bigger habitat, right? So in your backyard, there's other things that like your bird feeder, as many of us know. Here's a raccoon trying to get past that baffle, which is a very good thing to have on a bird feeder pole. So we always want to keep in focus that a backyard is part of a much bigger habitat. And this idea has been growing so much, but it goes back quite a ways. One of the earlier books was someone from the Pound Ridge area. Some of you know, Sarah Stein, 93. Her book was really a kickoff book called Noah's Garden, Thinking of Our Backyard Ecology. Doug Tallamy has been the real leading voice on this, a number of different books. There's his first one. And then a lot of different programs from National Wildlife, from the Butterfly Association, even schoolyard habitats, Monarch Watch. All of these ideas have been coming together over the last 30 and 40 years as people began to think about how the little things in the world matter. And that's a phrase Doug Tallamy has picked up. The little things, the bugs, the insects, they're the things that actually run the world and keep things going and keep things healthy and working. And that idea actually first came from E.O. Wilson, but Doug Tallamy has popularized it. So if you have a chance to go deeper on this with any presentations, and there's many on the web from Doug Tallamy, I encourage you to do so, to really dig into the ecological ideas of our own backyards. Number of books out, number of videos. And that's in the resource handout that was mentioned earlier, a lot of these links for you to go deeper on that, including those books. But why does this matter? Why birds? Why care about birds? So something really strange happened, and it happened right before the pandemic broke. So the whole COVID pandemic kind of ran over this other huge news that came out the fall before the pandemic rolled over us. And it was all about birds. And it was all about 3 billion birds. And that's a website you'll definitely want to visit. And meanwhile, during the whole pandemic shutdown, something else huge happened, which is we had so many more people listening and watching to birds, right? Because they were at home or they had time and they're not going back and forth to work. Things were so much quieter and slower. And then we rediscovered, and was repopularized the idea that the birds really affect our mental health. Watching and listening to birds, measurable in people's brain scans. Even watching videos of nature can change our brain a little bit too, let alone getting out and watching in real life. So why care about birds? There's a whole big reason why we care about birds. 3 billion birds though. Why 3 billion birds? Birds are in every habitat on Earth. They're largely diurnal. Some come out at night. They move, they make noise. All that means is that birds are the most visible wildlife on the planet. And whether birds are in some habitats or not in some habitats helps us know how healthy the habitat is, including your own backyard, including your own community. Birds are bioindicators. They help us know if the planet's healthy. They help us know if the habitat's healthy. So why 3 billion birds? Well, this is what happened. And this news broke in fall 2019. And it gives me a chill every time I look at this. So birders have been measuring and counting birds for decades. We have something called the Christmas bird count that's gone on for more than 120 years, annual count of birds. Breeding bird surveys, most recently in the last decade, something called eBird that I'll talk about. So we have a ton of data about birds. But not all that data had been sifted through, right? And so some kind of compilation studies were done in fall 2019, and they had just stunning results. Scientific world was pretty stunned by this, and then COVID came and we lost track of it a little bit. You can read more about it at 3 billion birds. We've lost almost 3 billion birds since 1970 in North America. That's chilling. The numbers have dropped that sharply, and there's a whole bunch of causes, some of which you and I can influence. Some are bigger than us, that we all have to work together on, like climate change. But there are some things we can influence. And here's the picture, right? Before we get into our own backyards and our own neighborhoods. This is a true story. Many of you probably know the expression canary in a coal mine, and it's actually a true story. Before fancy electronic gauges, canaries in small cages were actually taken into coal mines. Birds breathe quicker. They have faster metabolism. And if the air went bad down there, it would be seen in the canary first. And the men down there, and they're largely men then, would know they had to leave. If the canary got sick, they were going to get sick, right? So that's actually real life, what birds do for us. They're bioindicators of healthy habitats. So healthy yards have a lot of different kinds of birds. Healthy communities are bird-friendly communities because they have healthy habitats. So that's why we're passionate about birds. We enjoy them. They're beautiful. They move, they sing, but they're also a reflection of healthy habitat. And just to circle back to that idea, how do we know bird numbers are falling? Because we watch birds and we count them. Here's actually a young birder over at FDR State Park counting birds for the Christmas bird count. So for bird-friendly backyards tonight, I want to focus on some of these simple actions that you and I can do that make a healthier habitat, that help birds. And many of these are common sense. Many of you may already know all of these ideas, or at least some of them. Here's one, for example, which is to do citizen science. What's that mean? That means to count birds, to keep track of the birds that are around your neighborhood or at your bird feeders. And I'll give you some great ideas how you can do that. You can actually add to the database of birds worldwide using eBird, using Feeder Watch, using Nest Watch. These are great programs, largely from Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And you can be part of the solution by keeping track of what birds you're seeing. And it's a lot of fun too. It's fun to do. So I'll talk a little bit about eBird here, and it's pretty cool. Here's another one. It may be a no-brainer to some of you, but I just tonight saw somebody else asking on a community group in Facebook, hey, how do I get somebody to spray for the ticks in my yard? Oh my goodness, right? Anything you spray for ticks is going to kill other invertebrates. It's going to kill insects. We kill insects, we kill the small things that hold the world together. We got to step away from that. It's past time. This is not something any of us want, which is a dead bluebird that was poisoned by pesticides in a yard. Let's get past that picture. What we want is something more like this, right? And there's a lot of resources out there, and this is one of the better ones, and it's on your resource sheet, healthyyards.org. We got kids and pets on those lawns too, so why are we spraying stuff on it, right? We're learning that there's hazards we didn't think about. Time to move past that. And then there's this that Doug Tallamy has highlighted. People put out bird feeders and they feel good about that. They're providing these seeds, right? Well, those same birds, cardinals, chickadees, that eat bird seeds in the winter, all feed their young entirely insects from your yard. So if you're spraying stuff to kill bugs in your yard, you're killing off the food that cardinals and chickadees need to feed their young. We don't want to do that. I'm sure you don't either. So we're just finding these connections and highlighting them to make a healthier yard. And then here's a tough one. Wow. If you have any influence at all on businesses, on schools that put out those poison bait boxes, those are the black boxes you'll see along the foundation of buildings. They contain rat poison. Rat poison kills more than rats. It kills raptors, kills owls, eagles, and hawks. We picked up a poisoned bald eagle at Croton Point last year. It managed to survive, but it was rat poison. So yeah, we have to take better steps here because we certainly don't intend to kill owls and hawks. And there are other solutions. I like this website. Raptors are the solutions. You hear the acronym RAPTS, RAT. Yes, rats. They have alternatives to those black bait boxes. So consider that if you can do that influence. All right. So what other choices? I'm going ahead here. Here's one that's just really making the news now. And that has to do with windows. And we were just talking about it before the program tonight. Windows are a huge hazard for birds, more than we realized, probably taking a toll in those 2.9 billion that we're missing. And here's why. Because birds, when they see a window, they see this, right? They see the reflected habitat and they fly thinking that's a way through. So this is a problem that you and I can help fix wherever we live or work, go to school, around town, businesses. Take a look at the windows and see what you can do. There's all kinds of products out there. There's something called the Acopian Bird Saver. Just Google window savers for birds. That helps prevent window strikes. Okay, that's when a bird flies against the window and it literally kills itself by hitting the window, and that happens a lot. Here's something different though on the screen here, and since we get a lot of calls about that, I wanted to be sure to mention this. This time of year is when we get a whole increase of calls about window bashing. This is where birds, typically a robin, cardinals, or the usual criminals, fly, flutter, 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 flutter against somebody's window, and it pretty much makes the people inside the house get a little freaked out. They think, is that bird trying to come in? Is this an omen? You know, this is really annoying. It starts at first light, and it's all again about reflection. That robin sees another robin in the window, and it's trying to defend its territory, a certain part of your yard, for just its mate and itself, and it doesn't want that other robin there, right? So you just have to think again about reflection, and there's a lot of different solutions for that. That's different than window strike, when a bird hits the window and dies, which is very sad. This one is a temporary seasonal thing. This one might be a seasonal thing too, depending on the angle of the sun. So just think about reflections, walk around buildings, think about that. Think about what you can do to change the impact of that building on birds. That would be great. There's a lot of solutions out there. And again, just Google and you'll find many different solutions that you might want to try. All right, so all different tactics here. Here's a controversial one. Before we talk about native plants, before we talk about bird boxes and bird feeders, it's great to do those things. But if we're not doing these other things I'm talking about up front, then we've got other problems, don't we? And one of these is cats. I mean, I grew up with cats. I grew up with cats that went in and out whenever they wanted to. I actually moved here to the Audubon Sanctuary where I live with 2 cats, and I let them out. They went and came and went whenever they wanted to. Sad thing is I lost one of them to a coyote, which is what happens around here to outside cats. And the other one probably took its toll on birds and chipmunks before it passed away, actually of old age. But we can't do that anymore. In some ways, as much of an invasive species as some of the invasive plant species you hear about. We love them dearly. Outside in the environment, they're going to do what they're going to do. If you drag a string in front of a cat, you know that it'll pounce on it, right? Same thing will happen if a little fluttering fledgling comes in front of your cat outside. And birds don't fly the first 3 or 4 days. They flutter around in the shrub layer being fed by the parents till they learn how to fly better. And we can have a 90% mortality on those in areas with outside cats. So this is a tough one, guys, a little controversial, but it's really important. There's a lot of great solutions at abcbirds.org, American Bird Conservancy, abcbirds.org. A lot of science, not hype, because one of the worst things going on is this idea of cat colonies, of trap, neuter, and release. It's an absolute disaster in habitats where there's cat colonies. So take a look at that. That's a tough topic. People feel passionate about it, but it's taken its toll on our birds. Part of that 2.9 billion. So what about food, shelter, water, space? What can we do for positive effects on birds for a bird-friendly backyard? Again, feeders are mostly for our delight. Bird feeders, and this is a great picture here, isn't it? Here's some goldfinches, some house finches. There's a junco here and a nice male cardinal in the back. Really wonderful to see those up close. And one of the things that Sawmill River Audubon has is a feeder cam. If you go to our website, we actually have a camera that's on 24/7 on a bird feeder set up here. And it's just a lot of fun to watch them. But more than putting out birdseed, a better solution, more sustainable really, alongside of a feeder if you wish, is to use native plants wherever we can put those in. And what a difference those make, providing food year round in different ways. This is a beautiful image of a cedar waxwing. I think one of the most gorgeous birds around here, a little smaller than a cardinal. Look at the colors on that. This is why it's called a waxwing, these tipped feathers. And so planting fruit that a waxwing could enjoy, different kinds of fruit, different times of the year. But what about feeders? The best source for you to learn about those is feederwatch.org. It's actually a citizen science project of counting birds at a feeder. But as part of that, they have all kinds of great information on the right kinds of feeders and seed for the right kinds of birds. Feeders come in a lot of shapes. You can see that here. Many of you know that. Notice these are baffles. These are cones on a pole to keep squirrels and raccoons from climbing up. A platform feeder is great because birds that like to feed on the ground, like cardinals, mourning doves, sparrows, will come to a platform feeder. Nice to have a roof on it, keep the snow and rain off. Some of these feeders are neat because they're a bin. You can fill them up and they'll dispense this seed slowly in a mini platform. This one has a suet feeder on the end. And suet is a cage feeder. Suet is a compressed beef fat. It might have seeds or other things in it. And it fits into cakes in a certain kind of feeder like this, where this Downy woodpecker is. And then these hopper feeders with the small perches are often good for smaller birds like goldfinch and chickadee. So great thing at Feeder Watch, you can find a lot of information on feeding birds, as well as some of the things to watch out for and how to keep your feeders healthy. A lot of good information on tricky bird IDs. But different kinds of seed are intended to attract different kinds of birds. Some of you know this. Black oil sunflower is a good all-purpose. Niger thistle is good for goldfinches and actually siskins when we get them. Millet is good for sparrows and mourning doves. Milo and cracked corn are some of the cheapest seeds. And if you buy bags of seed, just, from the supermarket, a lot of times they're full of these two kinds of seeds with very little of the other more quality seeds. So that's something to watch for. Peanut bits are pretty expensive, but titmice like them. And sometimes they're found in high quality mixed seeds. So look at this. Wouldn't that be amazing? Biggest woodpecker in North America, size of a crow, has come into this suet bag. This is a pileated woodpecker. And another reflection of how habitat reflects birds. And by that, I mean, if you look at a bird book from the 1950s, it will say that pileated woodpeckers are shy, retiring, hard to find, only in deep woods. And that's completely not true today. And that's because all of our suburban forests that have grown up since World War II are now old trees, relatively old trees, 60 and 70 and 80 and 90 years old, which are the big trees that pileated woodpeckers like. So now people are seeing pileated woodpeckers right in their backyards, right? Particularly on the ground, on stumps. And that's pretty thrilling. It's a big bird. So again, if you're going to have a bird feeder, good idea to have a baffle or string it across a pole, maybe with soda bottles on the pole line. Keep squirrels from getting there. And then be aware of this. You're going to be feeding birds that eat seed, and you're also going to be feeding birds that eat birds. Some people get upset about that, and it's hard to watch. We're humans. We don't like to watch one animal kill another one, but you're still feeding birds. You're feeding Cooper's hawk that might eat a mourning dove right in your backyard. So be aware of that. That's not unnatural. That's part of nature as well. One thing you can do, though, is to make sure that your feeder is near some bushes so birds have an escape. Good not to put the feeder right around the corner of the house so that the hawk can't come in so quick from ambush. And watch for hawks chasing birds that then hit the window, right? So think about where you place your feeder in relation to where a hawk might fly through. So Cooper's hawks are pretty cool. I think we have a pair that might be nesting here at Prine. They're a little smaller than crows, and the female might be close to crow size, and they're pretty cool to watch. Long, thin tail tells you they're a bird that makes sharp turns, and they sure do. So feederwatch.org will tell you lots and lots about the birds you could expect at a bird feeder, how to identify them, how even to add what you see to Project Feeder Watch and help track birds. One of the things I like at Project Feeder Watch is you can put in where you live, put in your food type, put in a feeder type, and it'll help you know when you click on different birds what kind of seed and feeder they like the best. These are birds that come to feeders across North America. So it's a very cool filter learning thing you can do there. All right, so what else makes a bird-friendly backyard? Moving beyond feeders, keeping in mind some of those ways we can help birds, talked about at the beginning. Again, we always want to keep in mind habitat, which is food, water, shelter, space, in some sort of arrangement, right? Some need more space, some need less. And one of the best ways to help habitat certainly is to use native plants. And again, just to say how important it is, for these birds to have insects. And the key that Doug Tallamy highlighted for us is because insects and plants evolve together, insects native to this country need plants native to this country. Common sense. Some plants support more insect than others. If you have a choice, oak trees provide food. He's documented for 557 species of caterpillars, which are big time food for nesting birds. Native tulip tree, 21 species, but the ginkgo tree, which some people have planted, is from China. It supports 0 native caterpillars. So that's a stark difference from 0 to 500. So try to pick plants any place you can influence on that, that are native plants. It makes a huge difference for habitat quality. So here's an experiment we did at one of our sanctuaries over in Millwood, Prine Sanctuary, named for the family that helped to start it. For about 30 years, we've had a butterfly and hummingbird garden. And we noticed as we pushed that more towards native plants, we saw more insects. So that was kind of cool. We're excited by that. We're like, oh yeah, more butterflies and other insects came, the more native plants we added. But then we did something different. We got a grant and we put in these 2 demonstration meadow plants. And inside them, we put different clusters of many more native plants that we hadn't even tried before. So these 2 small beds of meadow plants, perennials and annuals, grasses, native grasses. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. We put in these different groupings and it just was amazing. How many insects came, how many birds came. And this is where, you know, this is an Audubon sanctuary. We already had feeders. We already had, as I said, the butterfly and hummingbird garden. We already had a lot of good habitat, you know, that was healthy habitat. We never sprayed. The addition of the plants made such a difference. It was just amazing to us. Excuse me. So, and let me turn that back off. So you can get these arrangements that we did at our website, sawmillriveraudubon.org, to see some of the arrangements that we did. But we were able to do this through a national program called Plants for Birds from Audubon. They actually gave us a grant from the Coleman and Susan Burke Center for Native Plants. And you can jump in on these same ideas too. If you go to audubon.org, Plants for Birds, it's a big campaign that's been running for several years now. You can put in your zip code and get recommendations for plants for your town that are helpful for birds. Watch this. This isn't working. Let's try again. Out of that. That's just a quick promo. You can find that at audubon.org, Plants for Birds. So yeah, just to encourage us all to do what we can, all the little bits add up. And to remind us again, we're talking about habitat requirements as we come into the last part of tonight's program. And we need to be thinking about food, cover, water, and space in a certain recipe, right? A certain arrangement. And I mention that because you could do all kinds of good things in your backyard, and there's some birds you'll never attract. Right? So song sparrows are found all through our communities. They're singing now. They're one of the earliest singers. They're starting to nest now, one of the earliest nesters. So they're habitat generalists. They like edges, they like shrubs, they like lawns, and easy to find, easy to benefit with what we do in our backyards. Grasshopper sparrows only live in open grassland. There's one place in Westchester, I know you can see them when they return from South America in late May. and that's at Croton Point in the hill in the middle of that park on the river that is a capped landfill and is being maintained now as wild grassland. Then you'll find grasshopper sparrows. You see that difference? They're both sparrows, but they have very different habitat requirements. So to see a great blue heron, many of you know, 3 feet high, wings as wide as 6 feet, you need to be in aquatic habitat, right? A heron's not going to be in the middle of a forest unless it took a wrong turn. It's going to be on the edge of a river, the edge of a pond. So all this to say, right, birds and habitat are like interlaced fingers. Another example, we have lots of red-bellied woodpeckers here. We didn't 60 years ago. This is a bird that's advanced from the south, probably with climate shift, as well as feeders. But we don't have very many red-headed woodpeckers, although sometimes people call this bird red-headed. This bird lives to our south, it lives to our west, lives to our north. For some reason, it doesn't live around Westchester very much. Probably has to do with habitat requirements. And then so on and so forth. We have lots of house finches. Only rarely do we have purple finches, although sometimes folks mix those up. Yeah, different birds, different habitats. So you want to think about which birds are possible, when and where. And birding is always about where you are and when you are. It's one of the first questions you think about when you're trying to identify a bird is when you are and where you are. So you look at range maps, the orange being where this bird nests. Look at this, the blue is where it winters, right? So when we're trying to protect birds, sometimes the problem is some things we can help and some we can't help directly, except through international conservation organizations. The black and white warbler's survival depends on habitat all down through Central America, South America, Cuba, the islands. You see that? So, but let's think. Food, we talked about with feeders and native plants, but water is critical too, and all animals need it. Some need it for bathing, and birds have to wash their feathers even on the coldest winter day to maintain the fluff and the loft for flying. And how great is this, right? A pair of male bluebirds at a bird bath. Thing to know about water features, birds like shallow water. They like to be able to stand in the water and really just be up to their bellies. They don't want to go under the water to take a bath. So most bird baths out there, a lot of bird baths out there are designed wrong. They need to be shallow. Some people set up a drip or a fountain. In the winter, they can get a heated bird bath. I know that seems crazy, but there's special plugs you can use for outside, and it makes a big difference for birds to attract them with water. So let's talk about cover. Wildlife need places to shelter, places to hide from predators or hunt for prey. We'll talk about boxes in a moment too, but as we finish up now, I wanted to talk about the idea of shelter, both in layers and boxes. We'll finish up talking about bird boxes, okay? And then save time for questions. So when you think about, and this is from Cornell Lab's Yard Map, which was a great program they had, they discontinued. So I want to give a shout out to the education materials that came out of that. You need to think of layers. So you can think about your yard or any property that you can influence. Think about the layers of the property, because different birds, for example, live in different layers, whether it's the ground, the understory, or the canopy. Blue jays, for example, 85% of their food comes from those oak trees. Blackburnian warblers, which visit here in fall and winter and breed further north, they love evergreen trees and they forage high. The whole issue of standing dead trees is a big one. Particularly as we get more intense windstorms with climate change, people are getting deeper and deeper into arborophobia. They're being afraid of their trees. Sometimes we have to take trees down if they're near houses, if they could affect roadways. But where we have the ability to leave trees up, particularly standing dead trees, we're providing really valuable habitat for nesting and roosting. The overstory, the top layer of the forest is one thing. The mid-story with shrubs is really lacking in Westchester. And that has to do with the density of our white-tailed deer population. We need that middle story because there are birds that nest there that don't nest anywhere else. The same birds, mind you, that eat the bugs that keep our trees healthy. So if we don't have a middle layer of the forest, we're losing a great deal of health in our forest. And native shrubs are also good for a lot of times food, different times of the year with berries. I like this view of a young grosbeak eating dogwood. Dogwood's such a great tree. That's very a very rich berry in the fall for migrating birds. So looking at the understory, looking down the short plants out of the ground is another good area to look at. Also a safe place for birds to hide, particularly new fledglings. You can actually add shelter by doing the things illustrated on the screen here, making a brush pile. If there's some trees that have to come down, felling them in a way that does that. A brush pile is a really great shelter for birds, particularly in the winter. Like this nest, right? So let's talk about nests and shelters. I think that's what we have next, talking about places to raise young. Robin is the classic, right? We're all starting to hear their song now. It's a good song to learn because it'll help you recognize other songs when they come in. So I always like to watch for the nest construction of robins. And this reminds us that the majority of our songbirds are cup nesters. Okay, they build a new cup every year. They don't reuse them. They might even build multiple ones in the spring if they have more than one brood. Robins around here can certainly have at least 2 broods, 2 nestfuls that they raise to fledgling. So cup nesting is the main way, and these birds will not come to a bird box. Only some birds use bird boxes, and those are the cavity nesters. Other birds actually weave a cavity. Baltimore Oriole actually weaves a cup that it can hide inside, right? Swinging cup. And it's amazing to me, they do this with no hands, right? It's all built in. It's all hardwired, plus some experience. Sometimes first-year birds don't build as well as later ones. So what about nest boxes? Nest box is a fake hollow tree, is what it is. It's a fake cavity. A cavity is what a forester would call that hole in the tree. So a bird box has to be the right size and shape for the bird you're trying to attract. This is a natural cavity being used by an eastern bluebird to nest. It's actually taken in Rockefeller State Park. And most natural cavities are constructed by woodpeckers. They're the real estate developers in the forest, right? So they dig these perfectly round holes as nest holes once a year. And after they move out, other birds can use that nest hole. This is different than a woodpecker pecking on a tree to get the bugs out. Or this time of year, woodpeckers also do a drumming. There's a brrr, really fast on a tree, and that's a territorial noise that they make. So 3 reasons they're tapping on trees. But the holes that they make, look at this great nest hole that the Downy woodpecker make, other birds can live in later. So we call that a primary cavity nester, digs the cavity, versus a secondary one that might just use that cavity later. And a chickadee is actually both primary and secondary. If it's a soft snag, the kind of standing dead tree you could really almost push your finger into, a chickadee could actually dig a nest hole in there. And that makes earlier nesting possible, and of course, protection from predators. So woodpeckers, chickadees, nuthatches, these birds are primary. They dig the hole themselves. But look how much wildlife are secondary cavity nesters, including, of course, owls, kestrels. Here's a duck, hooded merganser and wood duck, that actually both nest in tree holes, usually pileated woodpecker holes, a flycatcher, and so forth. So think about the trees you can protect, right? Some trees have to come down. We know that. They leave a hole in the sky when they do. But if you can leave standing trees up, all the better. We're losing a lot of our ash trees right now, for example, from the emerald ash borer. And so there's going to be a lot of trees coming down. But if they're far enough away from building structure roads, it's great to leave them up because standing snags are really valuable. Foresters look at them this way. They kind of go through a whole life cycle, trees do. And these hard snags will attract some kinds of woodpeckers, while soft will attract other kinds of woodpeckers and cavity nesters. Look at this one. Isn't this great? This was a cavity over in Croton Point of a tree that's since fallen down, and it was really neat to go there and see the screech owl basking in the sun there. So just a couple of notes. Birds that nest in cavities actually take longer to develop inside, 28 days. And fledging is something you should know about with your backyard birds. That's the time from the time the egg hatches till the bird jumps out of the nest. When it jumps out, that's fledging. And it jumps out before it can fly. It's not an accident. It doesn't have its tail feathers grown yet. It's going to spend a few days in the shrub layer, hopefully not eaten by cats or dogs, learning to fly and still being fed by the parents. The parents feed them out of the nest, so they don't need rescued. That's a big word you can pass around. Look at this size comparison, right? Full-grown Downy woodpecker, full-grown pileated woodpecker, both at the suet feeder. That's amazing. And they both dig holes in trees to nest in, which later become holes for other birds and other wildlife to live in. Pretty amazing. I often look for the pileated woodpecker hole. I think I found a new one this year. They're perfectly round usually. This one's a little oblong, about the size of a softball. Two kinds of woodpeckers. They like soft snags. I'm going to go a little quickly here. This is excerpted from another program. But yeah, so you have a bird box. You need to build it to the right size and shape. It doesn't need an outside perch. That's actually a bad thing. And it needs to be able to be opened and cleaned out. This is exactly the time of year when you want to make sure bird boxes are cleaned out. Mice may have lived in them in the winter. You want to clear out all the old nesting material so they can be used again. So inside this black-capped chickadee, a lovely nest with moss and a little bit of deer fur, and little tiny eggs. That's how big they are, right? Size of a dime. Other things can move in those boxes. Flying squirrels, I've had them jump out and startle me. And here's the classic, the eastern bluebird nest. So there's a whole bunch of nest cams online, a CAM. So these are internet cameras that are focused down inside nest boxes like this. So you can actually watch inside nest boxes, different places around the country, and watch the development, which is pretty amazing. There's a tufted titmouse inside a nest box, chickadee again. So nest boxes are so needed that sometimes you'll see 3 different tenants. And this one started out as house wren with lots of sticks, chickadee, which always has a lot of moss, and then the eastern bluebird was the last tenant. So you can see why it's a good idea to clean them out. They get filled up. They also put them up in pairs because tree swallows will compete with eastern bluebirds, and they won't let another bird of the same kind live this close, but they'll let a bluebird live this close. Does that make sense? So you can have 2 kinds of species there, not competing for the same box. So much information at nestwatch.org. Nestwatch.org, again, is from Cornell, tell you the best kind of boxes, tell you the hole size for different kinds of birds, and that really makes a difference. I really don't want a perch. If you get a commercial one, just cut that perch off. Again, like feeders, you're going to need a predator guard on the pole. It doesn't work as well to put them on trees, to be honest. Squirrels and other things can climb right up and mess with them. But there's other predators that will get in the box unless you protect them. So that's good to do. Going quickly past that. All right. And again, yeah, keep our cats inside. That's what we need to do now. We don't want this. Let me jump ahead here as I finish up in here, wrap to the end. So it's amazing what we've been able to do. The fact that we have, from where I'm talking in Millwood, I know 6 different bald eagle nests within 15 miles of here. That's extraordinary. I could not have said that 25 years ago. We have brought back the bald eagle. Bald eagles were actually brought down from Alaska. Do you know that? New York State was the first to do that. Brought in young eagles, raised them here, because in 1976, America's bicentennial, in New York State, there was only 1 eagle nest in all of New York State, and it was infertile. The eggs were crushing under the parents due to DDT, due to a poison we put on the land to control insects that did what we didn't expect it to do. So new eagles were brought in here and raised and imprinted, and now we have eagles year-round in the Hudson Valley. That's just extraordinary to me. This is a great picture acquaintance of mine took of an eagle nest in the Hudson Valley. Isn't that great with a youngster there? Yeah. So we take actions and we can reverse some of the mistakes we've made. And we have made mistakes. There's 2.9 billion birds missing. But we can take action, and all the little bits add up. The little bits we can do right in our own yards, right in our own properties. Here's a wood thrush, beautiful bird. Will be back here May 1st. Right now they're in Belize in Central America. They come back up here, cousin of the robin, and sing in our forest. The most amazing song. You have to look that up, the wood thrush. But they nest in the understory. And if our forest doesn't have understory, or it's too heavily browsed by deer, wood thrush build a nest that's too exposed and they lose their eggs and young. There's an amazing study that's just been wrapped up at Rockefeller State Park with strong data on this. Half the park has bow hunting, the other half doesn't. And the difference in the wood thrush survivability. I know that's a tough topic too, killing deer, but we're at this place where we need our forests to survive. And we know that they won't survive if the birds aren't surviving, right? Tied together. So here's a healthy forest, and many of us forget sometimes what that looks like. It's a forest that has plants all the way to the ground. Ground plants, a shrub layer, that's a healthy forest. Drive over to Pennsylvania, some places in New England, you might see one. But around here, our forests look like this, and that's not healthy. So we've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of people working on this. We want to read a neat book about this, Nature Wars. There's an amazing story about how wildlife comebacks have caused conflict. And this is a problem from Boston to Atlanta, the whole megapolis. He talks about this impact happening in the suburbs all up and down the East Coast, how we deal with coyotes and bears and raccoons and white-tailed deer. It's pretty interesting. Big picture look. But here's what we know as we finish up here and save time for questions. Everything's connected. This is an activity we do at in-person programs where we give everybody in the circle a card that has a plant or an animal name on it that lives in Westchester. And then the game starts with a ball of string. And we start with one organism, maybe a maple tree. And we say, who here has something that connects to maple trees? Somebody raises their hand and says, well, I'm a caterpillar that eats maple tree leaves. So we string the string over to them. And then we say, who connects to caterpillars? Somebody else raises their hand and says, I'm a scarlet tanager. I eat caterpillars. And we run the string over to them, and so forth, until we have everything connected in bits of yarn. And although we can't see this, this is exactly what's in our backyard. Everything is connected to everything else through the energy pathways. One thing eats another. Through the soil, through the water, through the air. So everything's connected. And when you start all of a sudden cutting threads, right, or passing toxins along threads, you affect something you never meant to affect. So this is what we're getting wise to. This is what we're realizing. Food webs, habitats, and forest tent caterpillars that are eaten by scarlet tanagers, and bald eagles that were affected by a poison we put down to kill mosquitoes, right? So the bald eagles have come back, and we can bring other things back with a lot of small choices in our backyards. Peregrine falcon is another bird that was restored after crashing from DDT. And right now, the birds are telling us, that's a hashtag, birds tell us, that the climate is changing, and birds are adapting as fast as they can. We're seeing them change their departure times and their arrival times, their nesting times, their singing times. They are adapting, while humans stand over in the corner and debate this question. Birds are changing as fast as they can because it's their survival, right? What can't change as fast are plants and insects. So we're going to see how that shift whole happens, and probably it'll mean the loss of even more birds and some changes in bird ranges. Birds are telling us that the climate is changing. And so we watch birds, we enjoy them, we count them because it's for the future. It's our future as well as theirs and the health of the planet. One website I always recommend, All About Birds, that'll connect you to Feeder Watch, connect you to bird cams, connect you to Nestbox Watch, everything you need to know. It's excellent work. Cornell Lab of Ornithology, All About Birds. eBird will show you what birders have recorded up to the last hour anywhere in the world. Seriously, go in there, hit explore, click an area like Westchester, and you can see checklists submitted up to the last hour all across the county. And of course, another great resource are the men and women and boys and girls and everybody that's involved in Audubon's groups and bird clubs. And again, this is a picture of some of the groups from Albany to New York City, with a really special shout out to our sister chapter, Bedford Audubon, which covers the area. The communities represented by tonight's library sponsoring this program. They have excellent programs, field trips, They also have a native plant garden at their headquarters with an opportunity for you to volunteer there as well. So I'm Ann Swaim. I'm with Sawmill River Audubon, sort of in the western third of the county. And I want to give thanks again to the 4 libraries that sponsored tonight's program. Okay, good. Shall we away?
We
we
can
good?
wrap it up. I mean, all the chat is thank you. What a great program. And you give wonderful programs, Anna.
Oh,
Looking
it's so
forward
much
to
fun.
having you back next year.
It's very nice. I really appreciate it. Yeah, we'll come do the raptor program for you. That's a popular one in the fall, sorting out
great.
hawks, owls, and eagles.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. All right, thanks, everybody. Really appreciated it.
Thanks for listening in, everybody.